welcome everybody to our February Learn Over Lunch. Thank you all so much for coming and squeezing in. We found event planning 101. If you only let the limited amount of people in, 6 people don't show up. If you go a little over, they all thankfully show up. So, but we're very excited that you all are here. Very proud to have IBT out to teach us about Outlook. Because I know everyone here only gets about 1 email a day, right? And it just sits there, and so we're very excited. Do want to thank IBT for coming out and presenting. Want to thank Zios. They were gracious enough to donate lunch for you today. Welcome Eric Kehmeier. Did I pronounce it right?
Yes.
Wondering about that one. Teach us about Outlook.
All right. Well, Heather Smith is also here with us today, so if there's questions that you guys have, please don't hesitate. I like these to kind of be an open forum. I'll go through the slide deck, kind of teach you some things in there, highlight a few things, but if you brought your laptops, feel free to ask questions, work on them while we're actually going through this. This is kind of, not to go tech or anything else, this is kind of real world, how you can actually improve a few things. So, a couple of facts that I actually found very interesting when dealing with email, and actually, raise the hands, I'm curious. How many people get more than 20 emails a day? Okay, how many more than 100? How many more
on the day?
More than 150? Oh, I'm not envious. All right, so I myself, I get about 100 a day, probably sometimes 120, and quite frankly, there's not enough hours in the day to get to every email. And also learn that there's email etiquette sometimes that I want to be responsive, I want to be able to go through this information. But this was an interesting fact. The average worker spends 13 hours each week reading and answering emails. Gentleman says, I've come to accept that my inbox is just one big never-ending game of Tetris where the emails keep flowing down into my mailbox. Does anybody else feel this way? Okay. So I will go through some things that are in Outlook, and also very curious too. How many people have a clue if they're on Outlook 2012? Any versions here? Who thinks they have the oldest version of Outlook?
I know I do.
You do? Okay. What version do you have?
Oh, I don't even have. I knew.
Do you have any? Okay. So there's 2012. There's the XP version, and then you can go back to like 2003. So a lot of these are going to be transferable across some, but this is primarily pointed at the newest version. So usually whoever's the oldest, I have a prize at the end. I'll help that later on. So there's a couple of things that are functions, and I'll go at a high level view. Sort email folders. There's a lot of different things. Actually, how many of you know you can create a folder in Outlook underneath your inbox? How many of you do that? Awesome, sweet. So there's some really neat things that you can do for structuring, and this is just logical flow, and it depends upon the person. So there's an example that you can do it where you have like CC, approval, review, and private. Now this will go in depth with kind of more of a communication standard, and this is kind of more of a company policy. So I'll give an example a little later on. If I were to use in my company, anytime that somebody CC'd me on a message, it means that I don't have to make a decision, but I need to be informed on it. I can have a rule that says anything I'm CC'd on automatically goes to a CC folder, and then at a certain point in a day, I go to that CC folder and just read those and file them away. Or if I'm too busy trying to read the things that actually need an approval, I can get to it the next day knowing I'm not dropping the ball on something. So the other piece to that, and why this is a policy, is because what I tell my staff is if you need my approval, you better put it in the subject line, the word approval. Because that will go to another folder, it will highlight it, and I know that those things mean that somebody's waiting on something from me. Same thing for review and then private. I actually follow this second structure now, so I have accounting, sales, HR, executive, and I actually will show you my mailbox here in a little bit. I have follow-up folders that are for each one of those structures. So if I know that there's something that I want to read, then I can actually have the rule go in there or actually file it for that, but it doesn't require my immediate attention or me to stop what I'm doing that could be client focused and focus on something that I just need to be brought up to speed on. Favorites is another function that I love because I'm also, share a little truth about me. I am ADD, like crazy. Actually, an adult, for real. I know this sounds funny, but I chase a lot of different squirrels, is what we call them. So what happens for me is if I know they're my folders and the favorites, those are the ones I really pay attention to. But I will file everything in a client, a matter subject, and go back to that for any type of review. I also use this as an example of flags. Before we go any further, just to tell you, if we ran out of materials, if you give Heather your business card or your email on the feedback form, we will send you the presentation and the soft copy of the documents that we have to provide. So I also hate to say if there's something that's important, like I've got a reminder on my calendar today, somebody called and left me a voicemail. Well, today I'm at this function, I'm not going to have time, but at 3:30 I put an object on my calendar to call and return that call. And I can classify it as if it's business, if it's sales, if it's marketing, if it's personal. And that helps me know very quickly because of my ADD, I'm very color coded. So when I look at my calendar, I can tell really quickly what's really important to look at.
I forget my colors.
I do too.
It all
But
becomes the same as I gotta do it.
well, here's another key fact to it too. And I think I have it here later. But because of those colors, what I've done is I have these follow-up folders. And from 8 to 8:30 every day, actually, let me back up. So Tuesday we have our marketing meeting. Monday morning from 8 to 8:30 I have review marketing email follow-up. Wednesday they have management meeting. So on Tuesday morning from 8 to 8:30 I have review management follow-up emails. So every day, the corresponding day's meeting, I have that first piece of my day to review those emails to make sure I'm on top. At the end of the day, I have review email follow-up folders too. So I've carved out the specific amount of time so that I know that I can address it versus trying to address it every time it comes in. Because it's not possible with 100 emails for you to try to attack it when it just comes in. And this is probably one of the biggest things. How many people here use rules?
Only when I'm out of office.
My only hope, and if you pull one thing out of this today, then I'll feel like it was a success. I absolutely love rules, okay? So, for instance, I have a newsletters folder. That's a follow-up. They never touch my actual inbox. Any of these newsletters that I actually like to read, and I'm kind of an R&D junkie, I love reading them, but only at certain times. I have a rule that says any message from that center, send it to the newsletter so it never touches my email box. It's in that other folder, it shows me how many are unread, and I can go back later and read those when I designate some time for it. So rules mean Outlook will basically automatically take an email and you can specify conditions to tell it what to do. And it usually falls into one of these two different categories, so organization or notification. There's a simple rules wizard that's already in there. This is not like you have to know how to be a programmer or write code or anything else. When you see an email come in, you can right click on it, go to the rules, and it's going to pop up this different option. So you can say move messages from a specific person to a folder with a specific subject and so on. This is a phenomenal way to stay kind of on track because newsletters, and this is kind of hard. Biggest fact that you can also do is if you've got a newsletter coming that you don't read, that you never read, haven't touched in a year, unsubscribe. I mean, I can't tell you how many of them I kept in my inbox for a year and never read any of them. I finally unsubscribed from it, don't look at it anyway, it's gone.
Pressure's gone.
Yeah, and that's where I can cut out 50 messages probably a day. Because those different providers used to sell your email address to different lists too, so that's how you can get a lot of those going. So conversation view, this is another thing. In 2012, I love this because if you've got one email that 5 or 6 people have either been on it or responded to it or so forth, you can always see the last one in the chain, but you can very easily click into any of the messages that were sent. So you can go in and say, I need to see the one that was from for this example. This is our office from Daryl when he sent it and what he said because somebody else responded to a newer version of it. You have all the copies. It's a quick and easy way just to expand the arrow and see what's the latest view. So this is kind of what I was talking about. The biggest thing that I can say is for me, I knew I needed to find an hour in the day. And Heather can testify, I'm not the most organized person in the world. I go all over the place, but for me, first thing in the morning, last thing of the day, was very easy for me to set out and carve 30 minutes. I don't have a very long attention span, so an hour wasn't going to happen, but this way I can process through. I always say, for that time that you're doing it, don't take phone calls, don't take anything else, put your D&D on and just do that. Book yourself these reoccurring appointments, an hour a day, process email, that's the important emails. Should give you enough time to really focus on what's coming in. And I will say it's very difficult at first, from my experience, because you're trying to sit down and do something that you'll find and go, okay, I need to do this right now. Make the response. The other thing on here is I have a one and done. If I've looked at that email once, that's the only time I'm going to look at it. I will either respond to it, I will move it, I will never deal with it again. Search tools. I even found one not too long ago that I hadn't been using that was a big help. So you've got a search option in your tab bar. You can search from the subject line, from the person, from the date. So if you're ever trying to find something and you don't know what, don't spend 20 minutes looking through all your folders. Go to the search bar, say it was from this person, it was around this time frame. It's going to save you 15, 20 minutes looking for something.
But on this, you can search by a word too, the newer version.
Absolutely.
That's the difference between this and my version.
Right.
I can't search by word, I can.
Search by sender, search by recipients. So, one item at a time. I also change my views occasionally. So, I can change at the very top, right click on it, and I want to sort by date, by from, who it was sent to, if it was flagged. This is nice too because if you knew what it was from that one person, you can right click, say what's sent. It's in your inbox. You can see the 5 or 6 that are from that person and find it pretty quickly. Enabling the reading pane is very nice. Most people probably have that by default anymore because you don't have to double click, open up a message. You can click on it, see the highlights, see if it's what you wanted, and move forward. And especially for me, this was a key piece. Do not move to the second email until the first one is taken care of. Don't start chasing after 5 emails at a time. So a couple of different ones. These seem to be, and the last time we presented this, were where people said, wow, that can provide value. There's 2 options where you can say ignore. So that means if the conversation is no longer relevant to you, any new responses won't appear in your inbox. So if you say, like, when I had that chain of replies, and I go, okay, this is, in our office, what happens is, happy birthday. Okay? So we've grown from 2 individuals back in 2007 to 30 now. And I get 30 emails about one person's happy birthday. I get kind of old with it. So I hit ignore. I don't see anything more. Clean up as well. This is a really nice feature because if you have 5 or 6 in a chain, and you basically hit clean up, it will automatically delete all except for the most recent one in that history. So, very similar. If I had 30 messages about happy birthday, and I still wanted to keep the one because I hadn't wished that person happy birthday, I can hit clean up, it'll delete 29 of them, but leave that one in there to remind me I need to go say happy birthday. So the ribbon is a little bit more expanded. You can see a lot more options on the top. All of these are very similar. Reply all, quick. If you want to do meetings, the quick steps is a nice add-on because you can see what you use most often. A lot of times, you can go in there very quickly and say, I'm going to do a team email. Hit this button. I specify teams within an organization. We have distribution groups, but I also do teams outside of my organization. So if there's the Bixby Chamber Board, and I want to email them, I can go in and create basically a team list and send it all to that every time I need to send a message. Couple of the nice ones up here to specify is the move and rules. They're very quick and easy to click move. It'll actually show you the ones that you've moved to recently. So if it's your most used, it'll show you move to my follow-up folder for this. You can just 2 clicks, have that message going and out of your inbox. This is something that I actually found as a huge help to us. This is where I say a lot of this is policy. If you're getting 100 emails and it's in your organization, we set forth a communication standard. And what that basically means is how you deal with when you're sending an email to somebody. So this is exactly out of what we have, and give you kind of examples. When you're sending an email out, only put one name in the to field. You can CC whoever else needs to do it, but when I get sent an email internally and there's 5 people on it, who's responsible to answer it? Am I? I don't know if you needed it from me, you never told me. So if I'm just being informed, I'm CC'd, but the person that it's sent to owns it. They're the one that's actually supposed to reply to it. Do not, it kind of goes, do not put a bullet list of names in the to field unless you're informing everybody, which goes back to the birthdays, Merry Christmas, type of things. Do not use the all location list, to solicit donations for any cause. If you have a worthy cause for us to contribute to, use the insider. We have an internal board. It doesn't need to go via email. In our group, not saying that we don't participate in a lot of this, we actually do, but it just got to where so many people are getting 30 messages about my kids selling candy bars or so forth. And most emails should be pretty short, to the point. I have kind of a rule, and I think it's in here too. If you're needing a request from me, and I'll actually tell myself here in a minute when I show you my inbox, if you need a request from me and I haven't answered you within 48 hours, it means I trust your judgment to make whatever call you feel is necessary. So that was really hard for me to put out there because I kind of like to know what's going on, but I also respect my team's time. So if I haven't responded to their email within 48 hours, they can run with it however they see fit. Now, the key back to them though is they better have sent me an email that requires a yes or no answer. I can make a decision. If it's something that requires research, other things, time, then I will respond back to them and say that that's a further discussion, maybe requires a meeting, and that way they're getting the response that we need. Somebody sends a question to a distribution group, think twice before you reply to it. Usually only one person needs to answer it. So, for instance, if I'm sending something to my service team, I send it out there, there's 14, 15 people out there. Most of the time I'm only looking for the one person to respond to it. So be conscientious of how many times those chains go, because I can't tell you how many different emails I've had, 20 different pieces or different emails from for really no reason. So another example, subject line is very important. Be very clear, don't just put, question. I still get those, by the way. But hey, I love putting an actual question in the subject line. How do I do this? And then can you please elaborate for this? Helps out so many different times because they already know what you're looking at without even having to read the message. They know I can get to that real quick. And this was another one. If we track this, I'd probably be fun. Everybody's polite. Everybody, for the most part, email etiquette, there's probably one thing is don't use caps unless you actually feel like you're yelling at somebody. But in our office, they're all very team-driven, very polite. But I can't tell you how many times I get an email from a distribution group or somebody just saying thank you, appreciate it so much. It's really unnecessary. We know that we're all conscientious of our coworkers, but it's not needed to send 30 different emails. So from our handbook, related to email, remember it's all email sent from to is company property. Do not use your company email address to conduct personal things. Don't sign up for your shopping, the online pieces. We're not very strict on you can do that, but don't use your work email. Never use company email for illicit purposes. These are standards. Everybody knows these things for the most part. And this was, obviously I changed this one. This was a big one. Emails must be answered within 24 hours if reply is needed. Unless you're away from the office, if you're out, make sure to put an out of office. So something else I recommend is doing a standard out of office. Because you'll have Heather, who's very professional, saying, I'm out of the office for this week, I'm at a convention, learning more, da, da, da. Then you'll have somebody else say, I'm out of the office, I'll get back with you later. So my out of office actually has some bullet points. It says what I'm doing, when I'm going to be back, and when somebody should expect a reply from me. So that's helpful for them to be aware of what's going on.
So what do you say when you're on vacation or personal time?
I'm on vacation. I tell them.
I'm recharging.
Jeff has a good out of office for that.
If you want, I can show you what I've used in the past, but mine actually, my business partner told me, he's like, that's not very professional. I said, it really is when you start thinking about it, because I've told somebody what's going on. You know, in mine I said, so what's up, what's going on, what's Eric doing? I'm finally taking a vacation for the first time in 3 years. You know, somebody gets mad at me for taking a vacation for the first time in 3 years. Yeah. Said I'm going to come back recharged. I'm excited about it. I'm going to go have a lot of fun, and I guarantee you when I get back, I'm going to be ready to hit the ground running, back in business.
See, I say, if I'm on business, I say limited phone access. And if I'm on personal, I say no phone access.
So, very good point, and I'll actually share. I just took my first vacation in 3 years a couple weeks ago. Went to Hawaii for 10 days. And in 10 days, I said exactly that. I said, I will have no access to return voicemails or emails. And if you need an immediate response, here are the teams, their emails, and their contact that you can touch base with. I also said, when I get back in the office that Monday, Tuesday, I'm sure I'm going to have quite a bit to get caught up on. I will do my best to respond to your emails Monday and Tuesday. So I set the expectations. I didn't have a single person get mad at me for not responding for almost 2 weeks. They knew, and they followed up with most everybody else. And this is a success story from my point of view, because in the time I was gone, 10 days gone out of the office completely. When I got back in the office, or when I left, I had 35 emails in my inbox. When I got back, I had 70, not hundreds.
Right.
Okay. So the messages piece, and I also too, another trick is if you have a cohort, somebody else in your department, a partner, so forth, let them view your email while you're gone. Let them manage it. Let them kind of make sure that when you come back. By the end of the day, Monday, when I got back, my email had gone from 70 to 30. By the end of the day, Tuesday, it was down in the 20s.
So it only took you 1 day to get back and going.
Right.
Wow.
And for me, I really prefer my inbox to be under 20 emails, because I treat it like it's an actual to-do list. So I use the follow-up items a lot, and if somebody sent me a voicemail or an email and I can't get to it that day, I will look at my calendar and actually specify some time on my calendar to do that task or to respond to them. And that's helped me out a lot too. And another thing too, I mean, we're a service company, and a lot of companies, we all, business to business, business to consumer, we all think we deliver good service. Well, good service most of the times means you respond in a timely fashion. What's that mean? If it's a voicemail, a lot of times you like to do that the same day. If it's an email, you're always like, I got a day, maybe two. This is something else to get through my entire organization. You should be responding to somebody within a day or two max. I mean, even if it's on, hey, I just wanted to do this. 'Cause a lot of people that, depending upon their personality or type, they're like, if I don't know the answer right off the hand, I'm going to wait until I find the answer. But it's not right to wait a week before sending somebody an email back. You can say, look, I appreciate your inquiry. I will look into this and find out what I need to do. Give me a day or two and I'll get back with you. Key to that, though, is getting back to them in a day or two. I always say, read and reread your email before sending it out and sending something you will regret later. We've all done it. Send something out. I probably did it 2 weeks ago. But I also do another key piece. If there's something that's going to be an important email, a message that I'm trying to deliver, I'll have somebody proofread it. I'm not an English major. I was an engineer. So Heather laughs because she gets that pleasure a lot of times. Check your email addresses, being sure they're not going to the wrong address. I know we've all done this too. The saved options that are in there, you go in there and you type in EK and thinking it's going to go to me, and somebody else came up first and you send them an email address. how embarrassing is that if you send them financial information or another client's information? So take a deep breath, slow down. And I always say, be sure to put the action item in the top of the email. Use a reminder or the remainder of the email for explanation, and then the action won't be missed by your content. So the most important thing. Yes.
Eric, at what point in time are you going to tell us not to use the when you start typing in names and the name pops up, at what point in time are you going to tell us to not use that as our contacts list, but to actually put those emails in our contact list?
I'm not using it. I'll tell you both, because I mean I've done it too. But there's a key piece is when you're moving from a workstation. Used to, depending upon what version, make sure that the technician copies that file over too, so you don't lose that.
Jacket, your jacket.
Just got an emergency call, so I've got to run.
So, yes, of course, I love having Outlook contacts, but I use the same thing. I use that too.
Now, what were y'all talking about? I didn't follow the scenario.
You know when the address pre-populates, you start to type in Jeff, and because you've emailed me before, it pops up. Well, then when something happens to Outlook in some way, shape, or form, and the IT guys inevitably come back to you and go, well, why didn't you have that in contacts? Well, it was being pre-populated. Oh, well, you shouldn't do that.
There are two different things, and I'll also say this.
You should put it in your contact because you're gonna lose it.
Yeah.
But the new version of Outlook 2012, you won't lose it.
No.
It used to be considered separate files within what Outlook held. Now it's all within the same file. So I do the same thing. Nice feature of it now, when you type in somebody and maybe the address isn't available anymore, it's got an X right there. You can remove it immediately. So Jeff, you change your email address from
Right.
Jeff at, and it's a new address. So you can delete that one and just add it back.
In that history,
Yeah.
I've had that problem.
Another really nice feature, the right-click option has a lot of different options. So if you would like to have contacts, because I love having contacts because the contacts sync to my phone and my tablet and everything else. You get an email from somebody, you right-click on it, say add to contact, it'll create the contact for you just like that. So it helps enable that option. So this is where I go back. I mean, there's a lot of features about Outlook. I'm happy to answer anything here. I'm also not going to preach policies, but I think how you manage your email goes to a couple of policies and how you decide to attack it. So we've all probably seen something very similar, the 4 Ds of decision making: delete it, do it, delegate it, or defer it. This is huge because if I don't need it when I'm talking about deleting it, I also look at unsubscribing if it's something that I'm getting that way. Do it right then and there, don't procrastinate it, or designate time. Delegate it, send it to that individual. I will also say delegation is a key piece. I was horrible at this. When I would delegate an email, I'd say, hey, please work on this for me. Well, one of two things would either happen. We have had pretty big growth, so if somebody new would go, well, Eric asked me for something, I better drop everything and do it right now. Or my manager, who's a good friend, would go, well, Eric didn't say when he needs it by, so it can be done later. So I was horrible about saying, not putting in when I needed it back by. So now part of my emails will say, I need you to look into this, ask me any questions, and I need it by next Friday. And defer it, that's another thing, is actually moving it out to another time. So to follow up or so forth, that means it's not a critical item to you. We've tested this many times. We've done this with a lot of lawyers, professional people. If you receive 40 to 100 messages per day, all you need is 1 hour of uninterrupted time to process and get through your inbox. If you're able to do that, it shows about 50% of what you get in email can be deleted, 30% can be delegated or completed in less than 2 minutes, and 20% can be deferred to your task list or calendar. And this is what's huge. Of course, if you have a backlog of hundreds, it's going to take a while. I'll show you what I did, and some of my follow-up folders have a lot of items in it. But that first time you go through it, what I found is my number is definitely under 40 emails, but I prefer it to be under 20. That's manageable for me every day. And I kind of have this rule in the back of my head: before I leave the office, I better make sure my email's under 20. So the next day I'm coming in and I can actually work. So this is kind of the end of the presentation. We have our cards. We have a lot of questions. I'll show you Outlook. I'll walk through anything. I do have my Outlook open here.
Can I ask a couple questions? Because like I actually use my phone a lot because I'm out a lot, and then also I have an iPad and things. And so the outlook is different in each of them, and I've learned to use some of the other buttons to, and some things you can do, some things you can't do, so I don't know if you have any suggestions and ideas on managing.
Well, I have an iPhone, I have an iPad.
See, I have a Droid, and then I have an iPad, and then I have a desktop.
What I've found is if you start within Outlook and manage it there, most of those changes, your folders you can view in the iPhone, the iPad, you are much easier to manage those devices once you kind of set these things in place here. As you can tell, when I left the office this morning, I had 10 items in my inbox. And I was out Monday, Tuesday, ill. I was out almost all of last week at a quarterly meeting. So I've been able to manage it pretty well. Now you can take this to what works for you, and there's a lot of other tips and tricks that work for others. This is just some things that work well.
I have the guilt of deleting emails
Yes.
issue. I don't know if this is unique, but it's like I clean my kitchen while I'm cooking. So for some reason, I look at that and I go, holy crap, I don't see the 10, I see the hundreds in the folders. And I'm wondering, how do you manage the delete versus actually emptying your trash box versus like, I don't know, I know that's related to our individual businesses, but
So with
how quick are you to delete something?
pretty quick.
Could you give me a call?
Because well, another thing that yes, you can absolutely, you can restore it pretty easily. But the thing for me, and this is just a personal pet peeve, everybody can do it. A lot of people use their deleted items like a storage folder, and I use a folder for a folder. So when there's probably 5 or 6 times a day I delete my deleted items just because I have this thing now that's kind of developed. I don't like to see, like even on my phone, I don't like to see one item, that little bubble. I don't
Sure.
like to see one that's not answered. Now I'll tell you about these here in a second because you're seeing an awful lot in there.
The bold stresses me.
The
Yeah,
what?
that's exactly
Bold. Means I gotta do it.
No.
That's exactly what
Yeah.
I'm
Unread.
saying. I'm like, oh.
But with
Everything's
the,
gotta be unbolded.
yeah, that's pretty similar for me. But the deleted items, what I do is I'll delete. Like I've actually deleted mine before today, and what happens is I go through and anything that came in today I delete. Well, probably about twice in the morning I look at the deleted items. I briefly skim through it, and then I empty the recycle bin. Because if I've double checked it, I've actually kind of broken one of my rules. I've actually now looked at it twice. So if it's, and then the back door is, if I come to find out that I needed it later, I can always recover it. And it's very easy to recover. If you just click on your deleted items folder, you can go back up and, let me see, it's kind of hard for me to view from here. Under the folder, recover the deleted item, and then you just are able to pick it. So, one other thing about my follow-up folders here, I have a lot of rules that will automatically put things in here. If you'll notice, these are green and not blue. One of the things, blue to me means attention. It's that bold, big thing that's out there. What you can do on the folder, if you right-click and go to Properties, right here, instead of showing, this is what's set by default, show number of unread items, you can tell it to show the total number of items in there. So in each one of those folders, it's showing me I got 96 in my operations folder, 30 in my HTG folder, 7 in leadership, and like I
There's the
said,
total emails in there.
It's the
not
total
unread.
emails.
Some of them are probably unread because it's bold.
and
It only takes one to make it bold.
right.
Right.
And as far as I'm concerned, if it's in that folder, it's not important enough for that one to be up there. It can wait till
So you
what I
programmed
do.
your brain to forget the bold.
Right. So in my calendar, I set, whether it's time, like here's my sales, exec, I review those. I have designated time to review those follow-up folders. And that helps
So
me.
you've memorized those colors, and when you look at that, you can tell what that is to you.
Not by the color. I still look at it. I hate to say it, I just.
Because I was thinking maybe I should just get 3 of the colors and just work with 3 and start there.
For me, I'm just a very visual person, so I like pictures, I like colors that get my attention, and quite honestly, what it does is it just separates things for me during the week, so I know this is different from this versus my end of the day one, which is probably not on there this week. Yeah, just says review email folders, so I can pick any ones I want to go through that I think are important at that time. But like on these 2 days, I didn't do
So
it, so I
your
just
folders are
deleted
in, do I see little boxes there? Your folders are in that appointment? The
No.
boxes on the left?
No. No, my folders are back over in the email box. What that does in the calendars just gives me the reminder, and I don't designate other time for that. The other thing that I've done is the waiting on response, because the delegation piece, when I send something or get something from somebody, I made a decision, but I want to make sure it's done, I'll move it to that waiting on response to make sure that, and I'll check that kind of every couple of days, to make sure that they took care of the task, that it got handled, or is off the plate.
It's on your radar to make sure to follow through.
Yeah, versus just filing it away and assuming that it's done, because there's a big difference between delegating and abdicating. So I want to make sure that, delegating and holding somebody responsible for it.
Right.
And they should have no problem with me coming in and say, hey, I saw this, you said you were going to work on this, let's get this done. It's not me micromanaging. They got to sign something, they said they were going to do it, and it's just me checking to make sure. In our organization, if somebody copies me on an email, they better copy me on the resolution or the result, because otherwise I'm coming to it and asking. I'm just curious. I can't let something go.
Right.
So what do you have in that folder? Do you have your sent email?
Sometimes I will put sent. Sometimes, like if it's something that it didn't have an original email, I kind of trick myself sometimes, so I send myself emails occasionally, or the sent item will do that. But most of the time, if I'm waiting a response, I have an original email from somebody asking for something. So I usually move that in there.
But doesn't it too sometimes have in this newer version, the trail of the different emails too, though, right?
Yes, so I will grab one of them. It doesn't,
Right.
like I have, gosh, you're gonna hate me guys for this. This is how long my lists are. I have it sectioned off by, accounting, clients, management, marketing, sales, support. Well, within that, it gets even deeper. So
Right.
I'm not ACD or OCD, but I've learned enough that I have to be able to answer for something even if it was 6 months ago.
Well, I've been wanting to use the rules, but I don't really, not really messed with it enough. Can you kind of show
Sure.
some just real quick things on it? 'Cause I
So
think that could help a lot.
this is what I also laugh. If you notice in my inbox, almost everyone's from Heather. So she's waiting on me for a lot of different things right now. So,
That or she likes you.
oh, I'm sure she probably is, maybe cursed my name last week for being out. So coming down here, you just simply right click. These are all the options you have. If you want to set a category on the email real quick, you can say, here's the options just to throw a color up there. Your follow-up reminders, I use this one a lot. It's like, it's not this week, not
I'm weak
tomorrow.
on that one.
Just do that real quick. The rules, come in here, always create messages, move from Heather. Oh, sorry, offline. But if you come in here, it's going to pull up that box, and then it's going to show you all the sections. You just click that, and for me, if you click move from Heather all the time, and then you just specify the folder you want it to go to, and you're done. 2 clicks.
So your follow-ups, though, they remain in your bottom right corner?
Yes.
And I know you can open up your Outlook each day with your reminders
Mhm.
if you wanted to.
Oh,
I
yeah.
did stumble across that.
Another neat piece too, if you have reminders open, like right now I don't have any reminders, it'll show down here, and it'll just say reminders and the amount. You can click on that and it'll open them up for you.
But they have the reminders there. How can you say you don't have any?
Well, these are tasks.
Oh.
I'm sorry, I misspoke earlier. These are tasks that I've assigned to.
See, I need help with that too.
Okay, let's say Acme Hotel is one of your clients. And you've got a lot of history with Acme Hotel, but you don't want to print that out and stick it in a paper folder. That's not efficient. But you've got some history, so you kept subfoldering it under Acme Hotel. But at some point, you're like, this doesn't need to be in my email, or a new account manager is taking that over. Is there any way to take an email folder and move it to Word or move it to your Exchange server? So something there that you're like, this doesn't need to be sitting here anymore. I've delegated all this to Bob. How do you take that out of email and go put it someplace else?
If it's previous, you can basically, like old emails in the past, you can archive that off.
Okay.
There's nothing in my inbox past 6 months,
Okay. Wow.
period.
So archive it to the server and then go pull it from the server.
Yeah, and in the new version, a lot of times if you're doing those archives, it's the same folder structure. So it's not like you have these archive settings. If it's new, and you actually say somebody from Acme, you can create a rule for that too. So anytime it's sent from this person, automatically forward it to this person, and then move it out of your box. So you can get complex with rules, but I prefer not to. I want it as easy as possible.
So the archive is not in Outlook.
It is.
It is in Outlook.
So if you want to archive, you can come up to these file settings. Right here you have a couple of different rules. Set your automatic reply. You hit the cleanup. You can hit archive. And what I've done in mine to specify is on these follow-ups, because they're more pertinent, and sometimes there's things that I don't get to for quite a while, you can come in here and tell it not to archive those folders. But my inbox runs the auto archive every 2 weeks, and if it's not within that 6-month period, it gets moved out of my.
So we can tell it, because that's my question that I had for a long time on archive. Does it do my e-folders, is what I've called my folders, my e-folders?
Folders
Does it
like
archive
this?
those or just my inbox?
No, it will do all.
Because I don't want it to do my left box. I don't want it to do those.
You can tell it not to.
Okay.
So you have those options.
If something's archived, can you still search it?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Awesome.
It's,
The search function, I mean, I love it. If I got to come up here and, I mean, quite honestly, right now with 10 in my inbox, I don't need to search for it.
But you can't technically move it out of Outlook to something else. Would you have to do a cut and paste function? I mean, Jim's saying that.
You can export it to a PST file,
Okay.
but you'd have to have something like Outlook to view it.
Okay.
So it has to have an email client.
Okay. Gotcha.
But
I have a question about the archives. I use archives just because of the volume that I get and the size of the documents. And I also work at home a lot, so I access the server, but I obviously don't get the same screen. Is there a way for me to access my archived folders from my home computer?
portal?
who do you work for?
Cox Media.
I got this question last time. You're actually going to have to ask the IT department at
Okay.
Cox because they use they don't use the built-in program for archiving. They have a third-party program that does it. So I cannot answer that one.
Okay.
Good question. What was the question I got last time?
From Cox?
Yeah, somebody else.
Well, we have such tight security, it can be a challenge sometimes.
I'm pretty sure, I mean, usually I say if you can think of a technology, there's a way to do it, depending upon if you're willing to pay for it.
Or if we're
Cox,
allowed.
Yes,
Yeah.
with Cox, it's going to be allowed. I know the ability, the functionality is there. Whether they allow it, I don't know. So that's more of a policy within Cox.
Just address making a to-do list using Outlook, and can I see it on my iPad and my iPhone?
That's part of my issue, is that like I create a task on my phone because I'm on there a lot, like ribbon cuttings and different things. Okay, I gotta make sure this one wants to be on this, or introduced at the lunch, or whatever. So I'm trying to keep them organized separate, so when I get back here, I can put them on the list that I'm gonna be on or whatever. And sometimes that's been a little bit of a challenge.
This is one of the biggest questions with the phones, iPhones and so forth. And quite honestly, it might have changed here recently, but I know tasks wouldn't replicate. You could do email, calendar, and contacts. And it was in the works. I apologize, I think about the last 3 weeks I've been out. I know there's an update for the iPhone. It might be available, but my workaround on that was instead of using tasks, I use reminders. Now it throws a calendar item out there, but the reminder will pop up on your phone. Will pop up on your iPad.
But a task button, quick, to, especially when you're driving and trying to talk and.
Should be doing
And
that
I'm
right,
not. I'm at a stop sign. I'm at a stoplight.
Truth
This
confession.
is the tasks
Sure.
using, what is this?
So,
So you only have a few seconds.
But you can come into task, and I have, like I can see Heather's, I can sign hers.
Where do you get to
I
tasks
do
in the
voice
first place?
text.
Okay, within your email, you're gonna see, like I've actually minimized mine, you'll see mail, calendar, contacts, tasks.
Okay.
And I just like to have mine minimized so I know what the task item looks like. So you can come in here, you can do new task, you can actually assign the specifics that you want for it. Most individuals, I kind of lean away from tasks personally because most people have a specific CRM application, whether it's the chamber has their membership directory and so forth. They have a lot of those functions within that specific third-party piece of software. But I use this for me, like when I need to go pick up dry cleaning or something else. I use it for more personal items than work.
The task does?
That's how I use a lot of them. But when you do,
I think I need to understand the difference between a task and a reminder.
and that's a hard one to explain. I've actually confused myself on that.
Like on my phone, what I've done is, because I've clicked the follow-up, the little reminder thing, and then I put it in a task, so then when I go back in here, then I can find it easier or whatever, like under ribbon cuttings or luncheons or whatever it is.
I believe here's where part of this comes into me, because I use this for everything. And
Follow-up.
I do almost all the time. These will just stay within Outlook. The reminders will pop up on your phone. But what's nice about this item here with adding the reminder, it doesn't always add a calendar item, but it treats it like it is. So you can actually specify when you're adding the reminder exactly when you want it to remind. So if I want it on this date at this time, it can remind you at that point. And these, pretty sure, will still remind you on your phone. Now I needed to double check with the last update of that.
Is there a way to set the default time on that reminder?
The
Like, it'll
default
come
time,
up, like, I don't know if all yours will come up at 4 p.m. every single time when you create a reminder. Where can we set the default time on?
Like, so it always comes up at the same time, like instead of 4 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's in the options. So if you, I don't know the answer right off the top of my head. If you want me to get it back to you, I can for sure find out. But when you come into like your,
And I quit using that part of some feature because it drove me crazy. Having
Well-
to set that every single time.
like I said, Heather, will you take note of that? Because I'm sure it's in the options. I'm pretty sure you can change anything. But I'm not sure right off the
Okay.
top of my head looking at it here.
Another question I have is when you go through your junk folder, and I kind of scan through my junk folder before I just delete it all, sometimes there's one in there that I want it to go into, and I right click and I send the option, but when it goes into my inbox, it goes in as not bold and I can't find it. I have to go look for it, let me say.
Yeah, sadly, because of it being in the junk, you've looked at it, it's considered red.
Yeah.
So that option, I believe.
But there's some place that you can click that mark as unread.
You can right click on it and say mark as
You
unread.
go find it first.
No, when
Maybe
you
when you're
when you
sending-
send it to your inbox, you're saying you move it from your junk to your inbox, and you have to go find it. If before you move it, if you click and do mark as unread, then it should keep it bold. Is that right?
I believe that's correct.
Okay,
I'd have
I'll
to
try
test
that.
it. Make sure.
One thing I've learned with it is if you click on, like right now he has mine pulled up, if I right click on that and move to another folder, it's going to remain red. But if I click on another email, then it marks it as red.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just like right now, if he was to click on newsletter and then move it, it would stay unread. And that's what I've.
Right.
Moving it, but from junk, you're probably highlighting it. You're on it. So if you, instead of just clicking on it and then right clicking and moving, if you just right click and move it, it may still take it as just an unread item.
I'll have to test it.
So I definitely recommend if you get emails too that are considered junk, right click, hit junk email. I recommend a spam filter to everybody. But they're huge benefits. So we utilize one. There's multiple different ways, but it basically takes a summary, and we get an email every day at 1 o'clock, and it says, "Here's your quarantined items," and you get the from the subject line, and then you can actually take a deeper dive into it, or you can say release, whitelist and release, or just ignore it. So it's huge help because I don't have to deal with it as they're coming in. I can just look at it once and be done.
Do you have that PowerPoint presentation somewhere?
Yes, we're actually going to send it out to everybody.
Oh.
That if you give a business card or on the feedback form your email, we'll email that out to everybody.
Well, thank you, everybody.